This is called to order the June 15th, 2022 mid-month meeting of the Ducktown Council. For the record, Lori, please note that Tony Shano was excused from today. Item number 1, discussion and consideration of full year 2022 end-of-year budget amendments. With this time, I'd like to turn over to Jessica Barnes.
Good afternoon. So Drew emailed you guys 2 budget amendments, Budget Amendment 9, which basically would allow us to complete some more projects in this fiscal year budget, and then as well as Budget Amendment 10, which corrects 2 previous budget amendments that we did earlier this year in March and at the June 1st meeting. And then, does anybody have any questions about the budget amendments first? I wasn't going to read line for line, but yes.
Christian, can you turn up the volume a little bit?
I just wanted, when you said we corrected them, was it just that we had them in the wrong category?
Exactly. So Budget Amendment 4 was for the debt service payments for the new beach nourishment accounts, and we decreased the beach fund expenditure when we should have increased the transfers to the capital reserve fund on the revenue side. Oh. And then it was the same thing for Budget Amendment 8, same correction that needs to be made.
Interesting. So live and learn.
Yes.
I was saying that I thought it was great that we had Teresa Osborne to help us fine-tune
Definitely.
everything before the end of the year so that we
Yes,
can
absolutely.
get everything right. Great. Thank you.
And then, of course, the ordinance amending Ordinance 22-02, Ordinance 22-06. This is basically correcting the capital project ordinance for the new beach nourishment project. We found a couple invoices that were still posted to the general fund that were for expenses for the new project. So we just had to increase the transfer to capital reserve fund and then decrease the contingency. Anybody have any questions? No?
No.
All right. Thank you very much.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, we do. Approve the budget amendments.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget amendments as presented.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? No. There be none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Jessica. Town Manager Drew?
Motion to adopt the resolution. So there was 2 budget amendments and a resolution. So we need a second
Okay. I don't have
motion
that in
for
front of me. Do you have that? Resolution. I make a motion that we approve the resolution
22-06.
22-06.
For the capital project.
Ordinance. The ordinance.
Ordinance.
Right.
Oh, ordinance, right.
22-06.
I make a motion that we approve ordinance -22-06, an ordinance amending ordinance 22-02, a capital project ordinance for the town of Duck, North Carolina.
Any discussion on the motion on the floor? There be none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Jessica.
And while we're talking about year-end finances, I want to just take a quick opportunity to give you our best guess right now. This is all unaudited, obviously. Jessica and I met. So I put some guesses on revenue and expenditures. Jessica and I met, and she corrected some of my guesses, and we came up with some numbers we feel comfortable with. Teresa's looked them over and helped us further refine those. So I just want to go over this with you real quickly. So is that not working? Okay. So, so you have this in the packet in front of you. So budget O is the original budget. A is the amended budget prior to what we did today. And then the last column is what we believe the year end will look like. So the bottom line on the revenue side is 12.96 million for revenue, which is, again, it's more than we expected, primarily in occupancy tax and sales tax are the two that considerably outperformed budget this year. On the expenditure side, we were underspending in comparison to the budget. So once again, we had the original budget, the amended budget prior to today, and then what we believe the estimate would be as of June 30. So that works out to be about 11.9 million. Included in the estimate for expenditures are the list of projects that we discussed with you all during your budget workshop. So it's about $158,000 worth of items that we were going to do in fiscal 23, but we knew we were going to be in pretty good shape in fiscal 22. So with your approval, actually the budget amendment you just approved authorizes this spending. So we'll go ahead and get these started. And then also, I've also shown here the budget amendments you just approved. So it's a total about $178,000. All of that is included in the year-end estimates. So if you're doing the math, 12.9 less 11.9, so revenue less expenditures is about $1 million that we project that we'll be adding to fund balance at the end of this fiscal year. That's after buying the fire truck and after all those other projects. So performing even better than we thought a couple of months ago when we came before you and said we'd like to buy a fire truck. So it was certainly the right year to do that and to pay cash for that piece of equipment. So your fund balance is going to grow by that $1,031,000 plus $335,000. And this is where it's going to get a little confusing. As we transition from fiscal 21 to 22, one of the first amendments you made to your fiscal 22 budget was to appropriate $335,000 of fund balance for purchase order carryovers. So it was money that was encumbered in the prior fiscal year that you need to bring forward into the current in order to legally spend it. That 335 showed up in your audited financial statements as assigned fund balance. You'll recall in your financial statements there's a line in your fund balance that's called stabilized by state statute. That's where that 335 was. What this all means is that because we didn't spend that 335 this year, we did everything, we did all the purchases that were authorized, but still within the authorized budget without having to move any of that money from fund balance. That 335 in your audited financial statements at the end of fiscal 22 basically will move from assigned fund balance to unassigned fund balance. So that will get added to the $1 million. So you're looking at about $1.3 million that we're going to add to fund balance this year. That will bring in, that's a little small up there, but you can see it in your packets as well, a little over $8 million in unassigned fund balance that we'll have at the end of fiscal 22. Again, if all of our calculations are right and everything works out the way we think it's going to. As a percentage, that still puts you north of your target of 75%. It's at 76.7, so we'll call it just 76%. You'll recall when we were looking at buying the fire truck, we were looking at about half of this amount going into fund balance, and we were going to be just below 75. But if everything works out right, we'll be above your 75% fund balance target. And that'll be the second year in a row that we've been able to maintain a balance above what you targeted. So that's just that's what it's looking like right now. We have a fairly high degree of confidence, but it's not a done deal until all the final numbers come in, especially on the revenue side. The one number that we didn't agree with Teresa on was sales tax. We have predicted it at 1.85 million. She was more comfortable at 1.95. I chose to be a little more conservative, and if we outperform that, I'm okay with that. Do you have any questions? Is this clear as mud?
Well, you've really explained everything very well, and I appreciate that. I was getting a little bit caught up in the fact that our revenue and expenses were, down from both the original and the adjusted, and that really has to do with the fact, as I look quickly, about the big project, the brick project.
That's correct.
And so essentially, the way we would look at that is that, it doesn't affect an audit or anything to just pull that all out and just stick it in the next year. And basically, that's, that's not looked at, that's a big sway right there with the 2 point whatever million, almost 3. So that's just part of the deal. They're just going to pluck it out of last year and put it back in for next year.
Correct. Yeah. So it's already in the approved fiscal 23 budget.
Okay.
The revenue and expenditures for that. And of course, with the email that I shared with council earlier this week regarding that additional grant funding, at some point we'll need to actually amend the fiscal 23 budget to recognize that.
That's great.
$500,000 additional funding, so yeah.
And then you're basing the estimates on, like you were just talking about, the receivables for sales and occupancy tax, and so that's just a guesstimate, and which I'm hearing that you were kind of both being conservative on.
I believe we were fairly conservative based on what we've seen. So we always look back at the same period, the prior year. Mm-hmm. My original estimate, and the one that Jessica and I had talked through, was not increasing the amount, but actually figuring that we'll receive the same amount in 23 that we did in 22 in the same period. Teresa was basing hers on about an 8% increase, which is what we've been seeing so far in fiscal 23. But again, just choosing to be really conservative and not trying to overinflate numbers if we can.
Yeah. And I haven't looked at it either, but sometimes the number of weeks in a month can if you got 5 versus 4 in a month, that can affect you too. So it'll be interesting to see where we show up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love having all these heads on, the trifecta of good brains on all this, so thank you.
Certainly.
Drew, what's our assigned balance, roughly? I know it's the 8% state, but do we have a number?
I'd have to go back and look at the audited financial statement from fiscal 21 for that. I don't have that number in my head.
Sounds about right.
Any additional questions for Drew?
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll go on to item number 2, old business items deferred from previous meetings. An overview of the Town of Duck Emergency Operations Plan. Chief Donna Black.
This on, that would be easier. Perfect. Okay, good afternoon. Real quickly, just so you're aware, there's a bad structure fire in Currituck, and so Duck, Southern Shores, and Kitty Hawk are over there. You can see it across the way as well. I have Lieutenant Clark listening for me in case something happens here. Today we're going to review the emergency operations plan. It's a perfect time to do that. We revised the plan in 2020. You all approved it, but since then, a lot of changes in personnel and in key leadership. So we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to walk through our emergency operations plan. Mayor, I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak about senior leaders and just to review a tabletop for us, and then offer any questions you may have or any suggestions. In July, we'll bring back the operations plan to get updated and approved. So we'll start with Dare County. Ultimately, Dare County oversees our ability to get larger resources and work with the state, and ultimately, if there's large disasters, even including FEMA and things like that. So I want to touch on Dare County and then bring it down to our level. Dare County Emergency Operations Center, it's the focal point for information gathering, tactical planning, and support requests by the towns and other agencies and partners. It's a single point for resource ordering, and I'll talk about that with Web EOC. We just went through training. We'll get to that a few slides down. And ultimately, the senior leaders are responsible for overall emergency policy. The mayor sits on that group there. The way the EOC is structured at the county level is the senior leaders determine policy, their command staff, JIC, PIOs, help support that, and then there's the general staff and support functions for the county. Yes, Joint Information Center, and everyone will get an opportunity to expand on that. Thank you. So this is their org chart for Dare County Emergency Ops Center, just to give you an idea of how it flows down. Where we fit into this is we're at the local level, and basically information sharing will flow up. Our operations will be local, but if we have requests or support needs, we're going to bring it up the chain there. And you all have this, I think, in front of you as well. So just for a little emergency management 101, I have a few slides. What are the role of local governments? So the county has the primary responsibility to coordinate with state and federal agencies. Municipalities operate our own emergency management programs, but it's coordination with the county. But we have our own legal authority, so all the municipalities have that. Any emergency by general statute, you can read up there. Again, I just throw a couple of the statutes in here. It's important you have it in front of you. And in the interest of time and boredom, I won't read you definitions. Emergency management, those measures taken by the populace and the government to minimize adverse effects with anything. And that's what our plan does, and that's what we try to do, especially for public safety. So again, the role of local government, all emergencies begin and end at the local level. We have the primary role to mitigate anything that happens within our municipality, but we have a great partnership with Dare County, and we'll talk a little bit about that with some of the trainings we've done over the last few months. So the first training we did, I guess I've done a couple more, but that involved a lot of staff. We did on March 23rd and 24th, and that was a functional exercise to look at special events and mass gatherings. Several of us participated in that one. You can see all the other agencies that also participated, and we had also folks that do special event training that aren't specifically with a municipality. So it might have been Kitty Hawk Heights or other organizations that have gatherings of some sort, and it was a really good exercise to get more lay people in the room to understand our perspective, but also to make sure we understood their perspective on what we might be missing to tell ABC organization when they want to do a big event, what they may need to be thinking about. So it was really helpful. I think that will continue going forward. I will let our staff expand on this particular one if they want to when they get the opportunity to speak. So our emergency operations plan, as I said, we revised it in fall of 2020. We do that every couple years. We follow the National Incident Management System, which basically just defines our structure, how we operate. We can make it for little events, like a small town event, to a parade, to the jazz festival, or use it if we have a major hurricane or major event of any sort. When do we apply it? Obviously, storms. The diagram up on the top left is the tornado from 2011. To the right, I forget what hurricane I added. We have the Jazz Festival there, and then, of course, the parade. So we are very comfortable in adapting our plan for whatever comes at us. That's what our org chart looks like. And if you've sat in on our volunteer meetings, we live and breathe by boxes. Every box has a responsibility, and we can expand it or decrease it depending on the size of the event. This is an example of how we use those boxes for July 4th parade. So the emergency operations plans basically provides an overview of operations. It gives accountability to all levels. And then more importantly is it helps us with planning, and we make sure that we're training on it. Today we count as a tabletop exercise of sorts because it's really important we exercise the plan. If we use it for something or something different, we're definitely going to go back to the drawing board and say, do we need to add anything to the plan, change it, modify it? You've seen tweaks over the years. I think the one we did in 2020 went through Drew and James Wooten and made sure that we had aligned even more with Dare County. So we're always looking at it. It's living and breathing. So how do we decide the incident complexity? Some things are tactical. Early Monday morning, we had a structure fire. That's a very tactical event that doesn't require a lot of need to go into our emergency plan, if you will. But if we burned several houses down, or we had a wildland-urban interface that all of a sudden we're dealing with all kinds of things, that complexity would maybe indicate to utilize our emergency operations plan and a lot more of those boxes. So it just depends on what it is. A lot of times we'll have a nor'easter that we're probably doing parts of it, but we don't actually activate the whole plan. You have the plan, but these are the different functions within it. We actually added a lot in 2020, and then we took other things out and made them administrative. When we change an SOG that Chief Ackerman or myself might have, or if we tweak things as the PIO might, or even now with Drew sitting here and Jessica, some of those more operational pieces we can add and change as needed, not make it part of the plan, so we're always coming back to you. So what I'd like to do today is walk through our areas of responsibility, and we're going to use the template of the hurricane exercise we did with Dare County. Drew was there, I think Lieutenant Clark, myself, and Deputy Chief Bachelet for Duck. What I will say when I get the after actions, I don't know if you've looked at them and you see Duck representation, they list all the players. Every time there's a strong force of duck participants. So it's really nice to see that we're exercising as much as we can with the county. So it's very clear how we fit in and what we can ask for. So as we walk through, I'll give you some timelines, and I just want to give everyone the opportunity to talk about their areas. As we do this, we'll do it in this order. So Mayor, we'll let you go first. I'll let the town manager speak. We'll let Christian speak. DC was going to speak for me. He's over at the fire, so I'll speak for fire. And then Chief Ackerman will speak for law enforcement. So we, on May 10th and 11th, it was scheduled for both. We ended up just doing May 11th. There was a Dare County hurricane exercise. It was really called Hurricane Donna, but I did not make that up or be narcissistic here. It was one that actually happened many, many years ago. So they used that as the template. I didn't want to change it because it changed everything. So take that however you want. That's the exercise we'll be using today. So they set us up. They said, okay, we have Hurricane Donna approaching, and this was some of the expected impacts that they threw at us right away. At the exercise, Duck was able to work as a unit. Actually, we worked in coordination with Nags Head, which was really nice to partner with another municipality. So these are some of the things that they told us were expected or anticipated impacts to kind of get us in the mind frame of what we need to be thinking about as the town of Duck. I won't read them all. You get the idea there. So we're starting with 72 to 96 hours out. And that for us, and this is where I'll let the mayor speak to that, basically about 96 hours out is when Dare County Emergency Operations is going to notify the municipalities. At 72 hours, we're probably getting ready. We're doing staff's doing personal preparations as well as work preparations. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the room right now, and I'll let the mayor really set the tone for this with what happens at his level. You know, what are our staff actions? What resources might we need? And what anticipated issues happen during this time? And a lot are going to probably fall on Chief Ackerman as people are trying to get out of here. So we're going to go around the room with that. So Mayor, I'm going to give it to you to give some background from your perspective.
Thanks, Chief. Well, generally about that time frame, we would get crawled into the county with the chairman and the other mayors, the superintendent of federal parks, the sheriff, and of course the emergency operations center director. It used to be called the control group, but as a result of what happened during COVID, it's now an advisory group. Only the county can generally make decisions. But in fact, this advisory group, we'd be looking basically at the intensity. We'd be in touch with the Weather Bureau. They usually would give us the forecast day by day. We can do it either in person or we can do it actually via Zoom. But in fact, the greatest discussions will always become evacuation and the decisions on evacuation and whether it's going to impact entirely Dare County or whether in fact it's going to impact, the Hatteras Island territory more so than the Northern Shore. So we'd be looking at those decisions as well as declaration of states of emergency. Now, one question I would have right now is we've been actually under a declaration of state of emergency for the last 2 years. So I would assume if there's a hurricane, it would be an amendment to that declaration of emergency. Since COVID that has not been released, so we're still under a state of emergency. And as we get closer, basically to the impact, of course, I'm communicating back with the town manager and staff. Most importantly, obviously, the two chiefs and PIO, and obviously community development from the standpoint of, pre and post preparations. And so the communication would be there, and then as we get close to the event, final decisions would be made. And once again, I say the most important decisions made by the advisory group would be evacuations, because in fact you need ample time. There's also coordination with Currituck. Currituck sometimes will join in the meeting, either that or the county managers of the two respective counties will in fact coordinate activity, because obviously Corolla could get shut off based on what we do down here. So that process takes place right up to the point of the event. Post-event, you want to talk about post-event too or not?
No, we'll do it. We're going to walk through the time frames, so want to break it up for all of us as well. So
Usually we'll meet daily and perhaps more often as we get closer to the event happening.
Perfect. Thank you. Drew.
So my role or my box, I guess, is I'm technically the incident commander. We would, in this ramp up, be meeting at least daily, if not more, to talk through the preparations that we need to make as evacuation orders are given, to see what we can do to support law enforcement. All of our staff, all of our office staff and supervisory level folks have gone through an exercise recently as we look at our continuity of operations plan to really write down what they're going to do when they're told to leave here. So if we give the order for our staff not to return to the office because there's an emergency coming, what are people going to do before they leave the office, and what are they going to take with them? Part of that, this is the right time to address this, part of that is some of our staff will not return here until after the emergency and everything is safe. They will still be working. So, for instance, Jessica has made arrangements with Camden County that she can go to their county facility where there's a generator, and she can work from there, and she'll have her checklist, and one of the things will be on there will be to take the box of checks with her. So we'll be able to continue to pay our bills and make payroll and stuff while we're not occupying here. And then each person will have kind of what's in their go kit, and that's something that we'll be practicing. And at some point, it won't seem like time off, but we'll be telling people you've got 2 hours to leave here. Go away with everything you would go away with. So I've got a checklist. I got a list of things I'm going to have to take with me, but I'm not going anywhere. But it's going to be packed up to be sure that I can get to the command post, which will be likely at the firehouse. But other folks, Christian's got a place that she can work off-site. Lori does. So the key staff will continue to work even though they're not here. And that we'll be talking through all that in these daily meetings and figuring out when it is we say, okay, everybody go home. Stay there. Is that what you needed?
Perfect. Yep.
Chief, could I add?
Absolutely.
Just going back to communications, council is not left out of the loop of this. Council is generally informed post-meeting as I come out of the meetings in Dare County. council and staff will get the same communication with respect to status and perhaps future plans. So council is not left out of that conversation either.
And that's part of my function as well, is just as we're making decisions and taking operational steps to be sure that the council is informed.
To communication, great point, Mayor. You're great at sending out immediately after whatever's going on. Another level that may occur is they'll do a countywide all-call for fire and police to be together and also give any status updates and things like that. We can use WebEOC, but a lot of times they'll also do an all-call and give us any information together, and we're usually all in the same room for that as well. All right, hi.
I was ready. Okay, so if I may back up just a tiny bit before 96 hours, throughout the year, I have a rotating list of things that go out. We do work with National Weather Service for National Hurricane Week. I work very closely with Sandy on sending out flood information, so a really large chunk of my time is preparing people for this eventuality, and so they know where to find information. But 72 to 96 hours before, depends on whether or not the JIC has been activated, but typically my first set of information that is going to go out is where people can find the correct information. They need to look at the Dare County website, they need to look at the Morehead City National Weather Service site. I have slides that go out just with that. Once I can talk about the JIC a little when it gets closer, but even before the JIC is activated, we do work with all the other PIOs in the town and the county, and so we do want to make sure some of our messaging is aligned. So even this early out, we would all be in contact with Dorothy Hester from the county just to make sure some of those things are aligned, especially if the county sets up a hotline number. We want to get ahead of that and get it out early.
I'll speak a bit for fire. As we know, when it's 96 hours here, most likely it's been on the radar literally for days, if not longer, originating from somewhere else. Sometimes they pop up quickly near us, but usually we have way more than 96 hours we know that potential is when they do the forecasting that's coming our way. So for fire, we're constantly paying attention to that. When we get to 96 hours, we're fueling, we're checking everything, we're securing anything at the property. It's a new day for both Chief Ackerman and I with staffing. The challenge we will have in the old building is how we're going to house everyone to bring them back. And Monica, you've been great over the years to acquire a property to try to house those that are off shift during the emergency. That's probably one of our big logistical changes for this year. Monica, we may be reaching out in a more formal way to secure that ahead of time because we have a lot of officers now and a lot of fire to try to put in that small little bunk room. So that's one thing we'll be changing. But at 96 hours, we're prepping, we're telling everyone to get their affairs in order. Personally, another piece to that, we haven't had the big one, and I hope we never have the big one, but we will want to make sure families are taken care of, that we have agreed on where families are going to go and try to keep everyone together, because that'll ease the stress on our public safety personnel. So at 96 hours, we're doing all those things. You know our firefighters well. Half of them are captains. They've been watching it forever and have their own ideas of what's going to happen, so it's a lot of discussion early on. Chief? You can come up here if you want.
All right, some of these things will spill over into a bit after, but our primary purpose any day of the year, and especially leading up to a major event, would be proactively patrolling the town, maintaining law and order, and the security of all property in town. Other than that, when we get to this point, we're going to break our resources into two squads of 7 each. The lieutenant will run one, I will run one, and then we can stay at a 12 on, 12 off schedule as long as we need to into the event and onto the other side of it. One of the things that Chief Black had mentioned is difficult having 7 officers that need to sleep at any given time, having to establish secure and quiet sleeping quarters for them so that they're well rested when it's their time to be on deck. facilitating an orderly evacuation is probably the most difficult thing we've got to do. Traffic control on Duck Road and things like Handy Hugo, we don't always think about. A lot of people trying to get gas at one time. So in the past, we've had to have a lot of resources posted there to make sure folks can get in and out. We will go street by street using public address announcements to make sure everyone's aware of the evacuation order and when that goes into effect. And we'll work through these steps as we get closer and closer to the event. We'll begin a house-by-house contact to encourage anybody that's remaining in town to strongly consider leaving after explaining to them exactly what will happen when the event reaches us and how response may be changed. And then finally, we would do a house-to-house contact to gather the next of kin information for anybody that has decided to stay. At that point, while this is going on, we're securing the public safety infrastructure. It means we need to take down all of the radar speed signs, license plate readers. Takes a lot of time to do that. And then securing our critical equipment, our technology, our evidence, records, all of that, so that if it needs to be transported out of town, it can be. We're going to ensure that our patrol fleet is fueled and equipped, and we're going to continue to respond to service while this calls for service, rather, while this is going on. And then we have a set of protocols to put in place if we had a major storm, say Category 4 or above, and it was looking like all personnel would need to be evacuated from Duck, and that would mean all of our equipment would have to go as well. So.
Again, in the exercise, we'll move on to that 36 to 48-hour period. Nicole is our shared admin, so she's doing the same thing as town staff. She'll be able to be up and going in 2 hours at another location as well. So at 36 to 48 hours, we get this update. The Hurricane Donna, sorry about that, is moving along towards us. Hurricane watch is definitely up for Hatteras Island, and we're at the tropical storm warning level. We know at this point there's a probable evacuation. Operations, we're preparing for the evacuation order. Chief Ackerman hit on it. I think, when you look back at issues, the one will be the Handy Hugo piece and then just the backup of traffic. We're beginning to document everything. So there'll be an official moment where we open the EOC and then everything's documented, everyone's time, mileage, any action. We use 214s to do that in operational periods to record everything, which is really important after for Drew and for Jessica when it comes to the FEMA reimbursement pieces. Logistics, we're getting supplies. Normally it falls on fire department. We'll get enough food, water, drink to sustain whatever essential staff is around for that 72-hour plus piece. We get on that as quick as we can, but not too far ahead in case it doesn't happen. And then I'll let Christian here speak to that. So I kind of jumped and made myself first, but Mayor, I'll go back to you if you want to add anything to that time period.
No, once again, I think the key thing is evacuation, whether it's going to be full or whether it's going to be partial. Mm-hmm. That comes into play as we get closer to the 0 hour. And then, of course, beyond that, it's going to be all post-reporting. So.
Right. Thank you. Christian.
So this is the time where Donna has up there that the JIC will be activated. So there's a portion of what I'm doing that is amplifying what the county is sending out. Once they have taken control of that message about evacuation and things like that, we amplify that. We also send town updates so they'll set times during the day that they're going to send out a county press release, and we'll send updates to that. So the flow of information goes both ways. Now, having said that, I still do quite a bit of local information, so trying to be very adaptable to what public safety is needing. Chief mentioned people trying to get gas at Handy Hugo. Maybe I need to be putting out something really targeted for Duck as well. This is also a really great time to direct people with questions, because this is when we'll start getting a lot of questions about if I leave, will I get my rental deposit back and all of those kinds of things. So trying to get that information, putting my email address out there and getting people to contact me and let everybody else do their work. Also rumor control at this time. we do it as part of the Joint Information Center, so we'll be doing it countywide, and the county will obviously put out things that will affect the entire county, but also keeping track of things that people might be saying on social media in Duck, oh, I heard we don't actually have to leave because of this and this and this, and just trying to make sure that if those things come out in a public forum somewhere, that I can address those.
Our mission doesn't change a whole lot as we get closer. So some of the things I talked about before, they're very dependent on what kind of storm we're dealing with, whether there's an evacuation, exactly what we're dealing with. So that's going to determine just how far out we begin some of those things. But we'd really be focusing on the evacuation at this point in time, if that's what it was looking like.
Chief, just before you, one of the interesting things as we get close to 0 hour is the amount of news media, especially national news media, that reaches out to chairmen and mayors, asking questions. And 2 years ago, I was on Neil Cavuto because they wanted to talk about, mandatory evacuation and why people weren't leaving, which was interesting. But I mean, we get inundated with calls over and above what social media and what Christian has to deal with. It's just, I think that's more of a real-time phenomena that's happened over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. And so that 12 to 24-hour period, it's this hurry up and wait really for us. And we are putting out the spot fires, whether it be a law enforcement issue or the media hounding the mayor. It's a weird time because we know we need to get everyone out. But also at the 12 to 24-hour mark, we hope we're pretty much set, right? We're ready to do what we need to do for actual storm. So at that point, EOC teams, we're where we need to be. Drew mentioned it. It is easier and harder to be in our current building, but we'll take that case by case. Meetings prior to will absolutely be here. It's much easier, but as we get closer to where we want everyone in their designated locations, there's a good chance we're going to be at the public safety building. We'll secure the offices here. Council's being updated regularly, and we're just reviewing everything. The big thing is working with you, Mayor, to make sure we get the right proclamations out and doing all that legal stuff. Upon completion, there's a moment where we're just gonna sit. Law enforcement will do their patrols as they need to, but we're probably in a react and respond mode at that point, which does change to landfall. Anyone want to add anything to that period of time?
I might just...
Yeah, we won't belabor.
I know that Drew mentioned it, but at this time frame, I would probably be transitioning to working from home. I'm all set up to work from home. I have agreements with both Kill Devil Hills and Nags Head that if I lose power or internet, I can go there. The only other kind of outlier is that I can be called into the actual Joint Information Center. We usually do that virtually. So while Dorothy Hester is stationed there and Manio, the rest of us are working remotely. Depending on their needs, the number of calls they're getting, things like that, there is also a place there I can go. And that would entail doing both my job for Duck, and I would take some shifts answering the phone and putting out information for the county.
Could I ask a question on the staying at the fire station or public safety building? Because there's been times before where, way back, I mean, Kellogg's was used as a secure site as well. And then I know when we built this building, we, equipped it with at least a little kitchen and a shower. So with the idea that somebody might be staying here. Can you just speak a little bit more about the...
Sure. So, yes, it's a 40-year-old building, and yes, every storm we've had, we've been fine. We might lose shingles and things like that. Our most vulnerable reality is our doors, our apparatus doors, and they are rated for 100 and something miles an hour. They're hurricane-rated doors. Even in the one we went to Kellogg's, we still kept a crew there. So we should be, again, we're going to be just like Chief Ackerman. We're going to be in two work groups. So we'll have off-site, we'll have two crews, a law enforcement and fire crew that won't be at the station at times because they won't be on duty. They're going to be in whatever alternate sites within town that we put them there, and then we will try to keep folks there. The building is secure as it's going to be. If it was a high enough rated storm, we're not going to stay there, and we're probably dividing and conquering. But from an operational standpoint, it's easier to be there. yes.
Well, and there was also the trouble with the apparatus itself when you have to worry about Sunset Grill, that bad spot, so
Yes,
deploying.
and we've done that for storms, absolutely. And your street has been several times becomes a location, because at least it's a little sheltered, that an apparatus is going to be outside somewhere at some point. It'll be engine 11. But we will, we need to divide and conquer, because we have to anticipate where we're going to get water. I have a few slides at the end. I'll hit on our hot spots that we tend to have to watch, and I might have included it in our next slide. We know we're going to get split, so we're going to divide. I give you an example of Hurricane Michael. Came up in the middle of the night very quickly. Lieutenant Clark was at Sanderling, said the water's coming over. By the time I could get out of bed, I got right here, and it was already coming over at Waterfront Shop. So we're very aware of what to look at and make sure that we've divided our resources. But at this point, still, that building's a little more helpful operationally.
Thank you.
Drew?
Just, I'll remind council, when we changed our phone system, one of the advantages of the voice over internet phone system is it doesn't care, the device doesn't care where you are. So, for instance, Nicole, one of the things in her go bag is her telephone. So she'll take her telephone and plug it into the internet wherever she is, and she'll be able to answer the phone as if she's sitting at her desk. And town hall staff will have that same advantage. So we won't be abandoning completely the town hall and the services that come through that, or the administrative numbers associated with public safety. So that was one of the advantages of that system. Is it sounds like we're abandoning it, but from my perspective, I'd rather have Christian and Lori and those folks working, and Jessica working somewhere else, than having to worry about them in one of our facilities. As long as they're safe and they're able to connect to the internet and have power, we'll keep them out of town until we absolutely need to have them back here. I'll be here. You're hearing the 12 on, 12 off. My backup is Joe. So we're really wanting Joe to get back back to the point where he and I are here. Primarily it will be me, and then I'll just have to rest as I can. And but if it's a prolonged event, I will call Joe back into town, and he'll stand watch for 12 hours at a shot. So.
When we get to landfall, obviously, we're all in our safe locations. Town offices are secure. We're doing the same types of things. Doesn't really change too much in that period. We are sitting and waiting. We will have thresholds of when we will respond. We will have to weigh the life safety issue. A tree in the roadway at 80-mile-an-hour winds is not an emergency call. But we do have, things we're going to look at as far as sustained winds and things if we're going to be responding. We're basically waiting. That's also a good time to rest the town manager, because we are not really doing anything that period except monitoring, right? Paying attention, listening to the beach, the other counties, or the other fire departments, Currituck County, and just monitoring at that point. So I threw in some storm impacts just so we can talk about what might be happening, and I thought I did as far as rising sound waters, which makes this a difficult location, because that, depending on the direction of the storm, if we get the sound side piece, and I have a picture later of the boardwalk, it does impact us being able to keep apparatus and things here. But if we know the storm's approaching, going to make landfall near Duck, and we have high winds, we're already thinking about what our damages may be. Sound rising at Town Hall, Sunset Grill, and Sanderling, we know we're getting cut in 2 or 3. If we get reports from the county there's major flooding and structural damage as the storm moves north, we can anticipate we're going to have to look for trees down, roads blocked, electrical issues, potential fires, all that. So I throw those thoughts in our heads, and then I'll flip it to the next slide about what we're going to do after the fact and what we're going to be looking for. So if immediate post-storm, this is typical. If anyone's been through storms, the winds will die down. They still might be sustained a little high. If we have these issues, and I'm going to let everyone talk about it as examples of how we have to coordinate, not only with ourselves, but with the county. So if we have this situation, there's multiple things for us. One, roads are inaccessible. if we have emergencies, that's going to impact Dare County EMS. It's going to impact us getting multiple vehicles to these locations because we've already split up in anticipation of this. And we can also identify what our priorities are going to be as soon as we can get out there. Any of you want to speak to that? I think PIO is probably the most important, so we don't have people running around after the storm.
So like Chief said, there's a lot of communication back and forth with the county. Of course, there's going to be what law enforcement and fire and rescue are telling the county, lots and lots of details. Then I'm going to be working with the other PIOs just to put out what our key messages are for people. We don't need to list every street that has a tree down, but we want to get out some key messages for people, especially if a certain portion of Duck is more affected. I will say this is another time that I get really busy because we get a lot of questions again about people wanting to come back, people asking specific questions about their streets or homes. So we spend, in this 12 to 24 hours, we spend a lot of time explaining how that damage assessment works, and that as soon as we have the information, we'll share it.
Hold up, and then we can go with the next slide. So I'll put up the next slide about that post-storm to 12-hour period, and Mayor, I'll let you also intervene here as well. That period of time is so important to us. We need that time to be able to get out to every street. We have you've probably heard through Sandy, a lot of times that we use zones. We have 5 zones for town. We want to get to every zone, every street, and make sure we at least get this windshield survey to know what kind of damage we have. This is pre-damage assessment and what safety concerns. I'll let Chief get up here in a minute, but we're going to suppress any fire or any life safety issues immediately. Initiate search and rescue if we find we have major house damage with potential subjects inside. We're going to look at emergency debris removal. You can remember a few storms ago, we had all the rocks at Sunset. We got to clear the road. It'll be in an emergency fashion. We can make it pretty later. We're going to be getting the damage assessment teams. They're going to get the call to be ready to then go out and do the work that Joe and Sandy will do to get that information, not just for us, but more importantly to the county. And then we're constantly evaluating safety and resource needs, and I'll expand on that a little bit with the EOC. But you want to add to that?
As soon as the event ends and we can safely get patrol cars on the street, it's our priority to do so for the visibility. And then also one of our largest challenge there is folks coming out of their houses after the storm. They believe it's over, and doing so prior to utilities being able to get into town, damage assessments to be completed. So there's definitely the risk of dangerous things going on, power lines down and things like that folks may not be aware of. In the past larger events, we've also had to set up checkpoints at the town line and make sure their staff for quite some time in some cases to make sure that folks don't come up here too prematurely. One of the things we see, a lot of contractors, homeowners immediately want their contractors to come out, put eyes on their house, do damage assessments, and what that does is put a lot of people on the road headed through here. So in past years, we've been able to stop that at the town line, at least until it's safe to do so. Other than that, we get out. All of our patrol cars are equipped with Wi-Fi routers in it that are on FirstNet service. So in the event all cell communications were to go down, we have an agreement with that provider to bring in satellite trucks that will allow us to continue to operate. And so those vehicles can follow around town staff or drive town staff around so that they can do damage assessments and have internet connectivity as they do that. So that can be uploaded directly to the EOC.
Mayor, yeah, definitely I want you to speak to this period of time because I think it's crazy for you.
Yeah, once the event's over, probably the biggest function that the advisory group has, probably a couple of functions, but one obviously will be assessment of the damage, which will come from staff, obviously. Secondarily will be reopening, because that's always the first question. You know, when we're going to let re-entry in and when in fact they're going to come in. And probably another one too, and that's the ability of the town to put out curfews. So based upon assessment of the two of you, you know, there may have to be a curfew put in town where people are just not allowed out onto the streets for a period of time, or maybe after in the evening or whatever. So also the possibility of curfews, and of course then at some point in time lifting of the declaration of emergency. But The big thing will be when people are anxious to get back to assess their damage.
Drew, you have anything to add at this point?
No, I think it's been well covered. I just want to say that during the event, it's important the council realize that when the wind's blowing hard, we may get calls for service that we say, we understand that there's a call for service and we'll go out and we can do it safely. So there are times that if the weather is too severe, we're not going to put our people in jeopardy, especially with mandatory evacuation, and we've told people to leave because we're not going to come help you until it's safe to do so. So that's just one of the messages that, we'll pass along through social media, through all the media contacts, through personal interaction with people when they say, I've ridden out every storm that there's ever been on the Outer Banks, and we'll just make sure that they're very clear in their understanding that we're not coming for them if it's unsafe to do so, because we need to protect our people too.
I put up a slide, Mayor hit on the damage assessment teams. Really, that's a Joe Sandy-led initiative, but public safety's helped in the past. Go ahead, Mayor.
One more point I'd like to make too, and that is, it's only happened once since I've been on council, and I think it was after Irene, but there might be the need for a special council meeting open to the public from a standpoint of depending upon how hard the town was hit and what in fact the after effects are. I remember we did have one, I think, up in the fire station before we had this facility, but since then I don't think we've ever had to have a special meeting, but there could be the reason for council to get back to take action with respect to issues that have arisen from this.
The great beauty now, post-COVID, is we know we can do that in a Zoom format and gather differently, so that'll be helpful. Real quick with damage assessment, we use a crisis track is the software that's used. Sandy's well-versed in this. We have predetermined teams set up to go out. We're tweaking it a little this year in that we want to make sure from a public safety standpoint, we're ready for them to go out, and we may even team staff with public safety so that if you come upon something, we can address it immediately and make sure we're keeping everyone safe there. Another piece, and we did a lot of this in our Hurricane DONNA exercise at the Emergency Operations Center, is the use of Web EOC. Like, we all have had a login and we use it to some degree, but they really made us exercise it a lot more in our training. It's a great way for all of us up and down, as long as we can get on the web, is to go ahead and put in our significant events so that the decision-making of the senior leaders and everyone, you're getting that real-time information. We have been using it for resource requests over the last couple of years. So as a town, I'm usually the point of contact with the fire marshal. We'll put it in Web EOC, but usually there's a phone call attached to that so we can move it along. Road closures, so if all of a sudden we know Sanderling or Sunset Grill, it's closed, we can put it in there. So now Dare County EMS sees it and DOT sees it. So they're really encouraging us to do more with Web EOC, and we all had an opportunity to practice that when we were there.
What is Web EOC? It's just photos? Is that what?
No, it's actually it's a whole web-based operational planning tool, basically. So you can put in key information. They'll do an incident action plan in there, all these different areas, situational reports. So if the manager's in charge of Web EOC for those couple hours, he's putting in that we have no power from Sunset Grill to the Currituck line. We're putting in information, so they're getting it real time, and also all those entities sitting in the room from DOT to Dominion are seeing that, knowing.
In real time?
Yeah. Instead of us, we used to do it the old-fashioned way. They do all calls, and then we'd all go around and be like, well, Duck has no power here, and this, and this, and this. Now it's just all electronic. Situational awareness.
Incident, IAP is incident
Is the
action
incident action plan, yeah. It's those things it's those FEMA documents that we put together and develop. That's in there for events. I put it in there because it's something we can use, and probably going to use it for a training with staff for the Jazz Festival with Dare County, so that everyone understands how we do that. So. Post-storm considerations, the mayor hit on the big one. The reentry is always the challenge. I'll speak to Duck I'll speak experientially, and I know Chief Ackerman too, to what usually tends to happen for us as the mayor can. Post-storm mitigation efforts, we're just literally putting out fires and anything that might be coming up in that post-storm. Debris collection removal becomes a huge piece for the town. We're documenting, and making sure we're doing all that because of the FEMA necessary paperwork, and also to hopefully get reimbursement, and then whatever the recovery is. I think the most challenging thing from my perspective as a volunteer, then moving up to chief, is that Duck tends not to get the greatest impacts, but for our little town, there's impacts, and we're not always going to get, and Mayor, please expand, we're not always going to get the